Okay, in this video, looks like I gotta hurry up. In this video, I wanted to cover a feature that's been in development for a while and requested for a while, and that is triggers, what I call triggers. It's similar to an add-on that a lot of people are probably familiar with, which is React, right? The premise is something happens in the world, an enemy does a TP move, and then you react to that action, right? As a player, whether you can do a weapon skill, cast magic, that's kind of the premise, right? There's a action and a reaction, and hence the name, the React. Triggers, I wanted to be a little bit broader, and so when I go over it, it's a little bit more functionality that you can have in there. One of the big things, instead of just recreating the wheel again, is like the ability to do queuing systems and how to reset, and I kind of cover that. So uh, hopefully you enjoy it. It's certainly something that I think is fun because now you can interact more with your party members. Uh, as a good example, just something I personally use just for fun is when I run like maybe Odyssey, my goal, right, and I do a seg farm. I do a buff at the start, and my bard, I like to have soul voice or whatever. So every time my bard does clarion call, because it uses that first, I'll have my corsair do cutting cards, right? So if my scholar uses tabula rasa, I can also cut in cards. That ensures that I pretty much will be able to use it again. Depends on the cutting cards, or I could use it both on the same player. So it's the idea on triggers is it's not limited to just an enemy. You can use players, you can be NPCs, and then you have a wide variety of built-in functions that you can kind of select for. I'm also building or putting this video out before I release the main. So when you have the new main, will be 3.6. This will have triggers incorporated in with it. Okay, so triggers is set up per character basis, right? So obviously, triggers is added to the option here. You'll have 6 triggers. Now, it's very similar to combat script in the fact that your triggers will be in the priority. So, for instance, maybe you might want to just do a blue proc or proc something, but it's not the greatest priority because you might have your white mage cast fire for whatever reason that might proc something, right? Maybe you need to do fire damage. But you also want to be like, no, Curaga, Curaga is more important for the white mage. Put that as priority 1. So now on the triggers, when you set a trigger, obviously it's in your priority order. So that allows you to, first off, ensure the action gets completed, assuming you have the ability to, and you're not busy enough, right? If you put your trigger all the way to the bottom, that basically means it's less and less and less important, right? That's how the order or the priority lists work. The things that are at the top are the highest priority. So here you can say, no, the most important thing is this action. Okay. So that's one thing about triggers. Very similar to combat scripts. You get 6 of them. It's just a good number to fit, and that's kind of what I ended up putting here. Now, I enabled the first one here, so I'll just try to walk through this as fast as I can, I suppose. This first one I call conditions. These are what the state, right, of the player has to be, or actor in the case of the HP, before the trigger will execute. So, for instance, if you don't want to react to an enemy's spell cast, like for instance, if you're pre-buffing and an enemy casts dread spikes, like Odin, you don't want your red mage just to fire off a dispel gun, pull the enemy while you're buffing, right? So one of the options you can do is just say, hey, you got to be engaged before this trigger to apply. Or maybe you got to be like, no, the player or the actor HP, which in that my scenario would be Odin. You got to have it set at like 99, right? So you've claimed it. Yeah. So there's some things that you can set up to ensure pretty neat things when you start talking about like I want to use this weapon skill when my HP gets below here and I have this buff active, right? So I'll go into like how the buffs gained and buff lost kind of all works. There's a lot of options, and that's what I my goal on the trigger was is not just to just incorporate a simple react in here, right? It allows you to actually change your play style. A lot of people are like, well, can I do tornado kick with my footwork up on a monk? Sure. I'll show you how you do that on buff active, and then you just set a trigger up for that your weapon skill, and put it above your normal weapon skill, and every time, as long as your TP slider, right? So oh yeah, TP. Well, you got to be at 1,000 TP, right? It does its check already for to ensure you have TP, but you can say like, well, I want it to be here, right? And then you can kind of configure. Obviously, you want to be engaged, and whatever. So, like I said, there's a lot of variables in what you set up. Conditions are simply these conditions have to be met to progress on to the actual next step, which I generically called settings here. But this is where you actually configure it. So, actor is the person that's actually doing the action. Relatively straightforward. So in this case, I'm going to make it pretty simple. I'm going to set it to myself. I'll cover this, I guess, really quickly. So you got self, player, NPC, enemy, pets, and blah, blah. So generally speaking, if I select player, I can define a player. So in this case, if I wanted to put Turin here, it's only going to watch for Turin. Whatever he does. Maybe I just want to look at abilities or something, right? And I just want to do like job abilities, and I just used, I don't know, provoke. Whoops. Yeah. But sometimes that's might be cumbersome, or you want to make it more dynamic because maybe someone rotated in your party. You don't have to put a name there. You can just click the any box or the any checkbox, and that would then look for any player, and by player I mean person in your alliance. If you select any, so this means it's you're in your alliance. Self obviously is you. Enemy, you can do the same thing. I can define like a numbing blossom or a vampire leech or whatever, or I could just say, hey, any enemy that uses dancing fullers, right? It's only going to be about one or two enemies, but generally speaking, you don't have to put the enemy's name in. Just it's nicer, I suppose, if you want to filter. If you want to filter a specific enemy. So, but this I'm going to start really easy. I'm going to do them on myself, okay? And I'm going to make it easy. I'm going to do magic. I'm going to do white magic, and I'm just going to have my white mage do. Let's just do cure. Okay, so that's the condition. Yavanna will have to cast cure. So that's the trigger. Now your response to that action is what you put down here. To show you, I'm going to make it pretty simple again. I'm going to do another magic. I'm going to do another white magic, but this time I'm just going to do, let's just do cure. Let's just do cure 4. Okay. So that's my response when I cast cure. Targeting, again, it's very similar. You can select a player, you put the player name, or I make it a little bit easier too. I give you the actor option. I can use actor in this particular case because, well, I guess I could just cast it on myself, as the actor, because I will be, or if I didn't want that, I could just be like, I'm going to cast Cure on Turin. So, relatively straightforward. There are some niche things I'll try to remember to cover. One of the more, I'll just finish off the rest of the tabs before I get into more of the complexity of some of the other options there. Okay, so trigger reset. This is if you only want it to happen one time. This is helpful if, for instance, you are on a goal boss and it reaches 40% and you want to change your weapon skill or distance or whether you attack or don't attack. And I'll show you how to do all that. Um, and it won't reset. So if the enemy does another move, it won't do it again. It does it one time, you're done, if you do not check the reset. If you do check the reset, it will essentially wait to 10 seconds to allow it to process again. So if enemy does the same TP move in 5 seconds, this trigger will not fire twice. It's only going to do it the first time because you didn't exceed the 10 seconds. That's what this reset about. The start type is basically whether or not you're going to do your action, whether it is beginning or finishing that action. Generally speaking, most people, you want to leave it as the default. Some things like invincible or job abilities, there is no start. So if you select start and you're trying to queue off a job ability, like I think the Warder of Courage, for instance, it won't work because there is no readies, right? Yavanna readies Mystic Boon, right? There's a start to the weapon skill and there's the end of the weapon skill. But like when you use Benediction, like my white mage will just be Yavanna uses Benediction. There's no preparatory, right? There's only execution. So just leave it at default unless you actually want to wait till that enemy finishes something before you cast like Dispel, right? If you know that way it's the quickest you can possibly get it, but you don't want to do it on the start of it because it won't have the buff. So generally speaking, use the default. It's going to default to the start when applicable. If there is no start, it will key off the finish. But unless you want to only wait for something, then you can manually select finish. So generally speaking, you don't really need to mess with that too much. Action delay, pretty straightforward. An enemy does that action, you're going to wait X amount of time before you do this trigger, right? That's simply all it does. The action timeout. If you do not complete said response in this time frame, you're done. So what's interesting, and I just say this because some people that run sorties, sometimes they want to proc an enemy by casting an elemental spell. What you can do is set this timeout to, like, let's say what happens is to 11 seconds, but if I have my reset down to 2 seconds, what's going to happen is there's a TP move that happens. My response may be cast Fire 1. Okay. I cast Fire 1, 2 seconds elapse, it resets. Okay. But you didn't time out yet, so it's going to cast it again and again and again and again. It's going to cast it probably maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times, depends how fast you're casting, until the timeout exceeds 11 seconds. So that's a unique situation where you can perform a action multiple times given one input, right, from the actor. Pretty niche. Most times you don't do that. And most times you can kind of just leave these or just standard, like, okay, maybe I just want to do a reset every 10 seconds or whatever. Boy. So sometimes these little ones are harder to get into. Not that it's critical, but the timeout, obviously if you set it too low, it's like 0. Well, you can't set it to 0. I made it, but like it would never actually fire, right? Because you immediately time out. But 5 seconds is probably reasonable because job abilities 2 seconds, spells, global cool and all this other stuff. So these are all configurations that happens on the timing, right? And you can play with it. And I'll show you some little tricks on the next one. So notifications. These are helpful because what you can do is it's going to fire notification. There's some options, whether you just send a tell to a player, you do a party chat, you do an echo to yourself, or you do an echo to the party. Those are the options. So you can be discreet as you want. But this one is going to do it on start. So if all the conditions are met, you're going to go and say, hey, caution, dread spikes, whatever. You can say in the party, whatever. A lot of times, just for this testing, I'll just be trigger number 1, start. Okay, I'll just do a party chat. This one's for the reset. This one's helpful to know when a trigger is fully, I guess, complete. And so that comes back to the timing, right? So if you're spending too much time on your reset and your action timeout is being recycled, it's kind of helpful, and you can put whatever you want again in here, and I'll just do an echo party here. Number 1, reset. Okay, so hopefully, like I said, I try to make this quick, but there's a lot in here when it comes to triggers. They're kind of fun. Like I said, it's kind of fun to play with. But high level, I'm going to fire this one off here. So when I cast Cure on myself, I'm going to then cast Cure 4 on Turin, it looks like. And then I have 5 seconds before it's going to time out. And then 10 seconds after that, it's going to allow me to do it again. And it's going to give me some. First one's going to be party notification. The other one's going to be the echo. So I'm going to turn this on. All right, I'll just see if I can get some space here. So let me go ahead and cast Cure. Cast Cure myself. So this particular time says trigger 1 start. And then you can see it casts Cure 4. We got to wait 10 seconds because it hasn't reset yet. So if I cast, and I'll show you here again, but if I cast Cure again, it shouldn't fire, right? So like but now if I do it again, it resets, so it'll fire again. You have to let her finish her next Cure. But if I do Cure again, nothing, right? Because my 5 seconds didn't elapse. Or I'm sorry, so it timed out, but it hasn't been reset. Now it's reset. Now if I do it again, it'll start off. That's what's it's kind of helpful to play. Maybe if you're just starting to make a trigger, try using the notifications. I put a timestamp on it, just to when you do like your battle review or something. If there's a big move, you can say, "Oh yeah, here it is," and then like 3 seconds later, what have you. There's some stuff that you can do for. Also, I did make a more robust logging system. So, this is a good place if people didn't know and you go get done with a tough fight and you got your butt kicked. You can come here and say like, oh yeah, there's the TP move or whatever. And obviously it's just I'm doing Cure now, so it's really mundane. But you can even get down here and say, oh, here's this NPC. So that actually is a numbing blossom that's going on crazy here. But you can kind of, if you're familiar enough, like, that's obviously first spell, Cure, target, caster, target. But anyway, more verbose is here. If you just want to ever look at battle logs, which is helpful when you set up triggers to react to enemy actions. Okay, so that was pretty straightforward, but that's not what a lot of people are looking for, right? What you really want to do is maybe run away from a TP move. So it's a lot of dangerous. Enemy has some dangerous moves, right? So if you're trying to, let's just do any enemy, right? And you want to, if you're doing an enemy, you want to go to, unless you're doing a spell or weapon skill, you can go to abilities. Now here's the trick. You want to make sure to use an enemy TP. Enemy TP moves are the common one that people, the dangerous things that happen. Now under here, this is pretty much the entirety of, yeah, the enemy TP moves are in here. So like, I don't know, I think it's called like Fullers. I don't know. That's a common one maybe. I think it's Fullers. I don't remember what K does. Um oh, it's Dancing Fullers maybe. Maybe? Oh yeah, there we go. So I can leave it as any because not many moves are done this way. So this particular thing, I would react only when that happens, and typically you'd want to run away, right? So that's what this Silmaril is. Silmaril is basically the combat section, okay? And this is typically where you'd run away. I don't want to be no more than like, I don't know, whatever, 13 yams or something, 14, whatever. So when this happens, this temporarily supersedes this, right? If you look at this section is exactly the same as your triggers combat section, and it's not it's not by coincidence. It is imposes over your current combat settings until the reset time, right? Well, technically, I'm sorry, it's the action timeout that is going to happen, right? So for 5 seconds, these combat settings will be applied. Once that is over, it resets if you have this enabled. If you don't, these are now your temporary combat settings that is basically applied. So, one of the things I've also added in this build is the allow interruption. Super important, right? Because maybe you are casting a cure when dancing foolers go off, and you don't care that the cure goes off because you're dead anyway if you don't move. So that's very important to do that, and I'll showcase this a little bit. Obviously, I'm not fighting an NM. I'm just going to do something pretty simple. White magic. I'm going to put this back. I'm going to do like a combo here real quick. White magic, and then just to make this simple. Okay, so you've seen the cure 4, but now I want to set up a second trigger. Where now, let's see here, I'll do it myself, and then it'll be a magic. I'm going to cue off of the. Let me make it different. Let me just something a little more obvious. Let's do like teleport holla or some shit like that. Dim. So here, when I see teleport, dim, my response will be I want to run to target, but I'm going to. So the same rules apply, right? So in this case, I'll watch for Turin, and then I'm going to allow interruptions, and I want to be this range 4 to 4ish to 8, and then I mean I guess I'll engage and face target. I'll set up my combat section. I'll do disengage target, run to target, and then I'll make sure it's somewhat far away. And I will also be wanting Turin. Okay. So if you noticed, this is important. Combat and priorities affect this section. So if you have combat way down here, you're not going to run until, for instance, if I had, let's just put in, I don't know, enfeebling high priority, right? Now, what you might get you caught up is this trigger 2 won't process or combat, which is part of the movement, until this enfeebling happens. So you want to make sure when you're looking at your priorities that you might, if it's a critical enough, like in that one, it's talking about movement, you definitely want these triggers to be up high and the combat, which associated with your movement. I'll just remove it for simplicity's sake. So let me go ahead and just engage. So I engaged on Turin. See what my combat section is. Probably between 10 and 17 yams. But what I'm going to do is fire off this chain. I'm going to cast Cure on myself. My white mage should cast Teleport Dam. Oh, yeah, and I forgot an important part. Oh, no, I did check it. Allow interruptions. At this point in time, my white mage should start moving when it casts Teleport Dem because trigger 2 is watching for that, right? And it should face the target and then eventually engage the target. Once it times out, it then will go back and roll back to my combat section. So it should then run away and then disengage the target. Okay. So let's see, or triggers. Let's see if I did this. So she started. Going to cast Cure on myself. So trigger fired. Now it's going to go started Teleport Dem. You can see it got interrupted because she decided to run. Now she's trying to draw her weapon. We're going to have to wait till the timeout. The timed out, and then it defaulted back to the combat section, which is disengaged and is anywhere from 5 or 10 to 17, and she ended up like at 11, right? So that was that was a couple things rolled in, but you can kind of see where you can do some interesting things with your characters by chaining actions, and then how what I call Silmaril interplays with the combat. Okay, so that was how to apply these. There's another one. There's some other cool things in here, like you could just do, for instance, you could trigger off a skill chain. So if you want to do lunge, right? If you're a rune fencer, you could set, skill chain. But I only want to do this type of skill chain, and triggers is very open-ended, much like combat script is supposed to be. And you can have up to 6 of them. Trying to think if there's anything, and as another example, let's just set trigger 3 as an example to watch other people. And then if I want, oh yeah, the buff change. I want to talk about that one because that one's kind of a interesting one. When I do that, let me go to my monk here real quick. I'm going to go to him. Let's see if I do buff and I want to do. Well, let's just say what the heck, Warcry maybe. Okay, so if the loss, so there's option gain and loss. Loss means you don't have the buff. Gain is it's active. Really, it's really when it's like you have the rising edge and the falling edge of something, right? So this case would be the falling edge. So if I had the buff and it goes away, this would fire. Or if I don't have the buff, this also fires. You have your absence of this boss is your loss. And my response is abilities. I'm going to go job abilities and Warcry. So this is just to make it very simple. And I'll just do the actor. I mean, you can put the self, I guess. So in this case, if I start this on Turin, he does not have the buff for Warcry. He should use Warcry. Once it does that, it will stop, right? So over here, hit this. So his buff was not active. He's got now the buff. And that's it. Pretty straightforward. It's helpful for things like I alluded to. What if I want my buff to be footwork, and it's a gain, so I have the buff. I then want to have it do a weapon skill, and I want to be tornado Oops, sorry. I got to do hand to hand. Now I got to do tornado. That tornado kick. I don't know how much time I got left. Probably like none. Uh, and then here you basically would put it on the enemy. So if I have footwork active, use tornado kick, and you're going to target the enemy, and then you could basically, I don't know, maybe you're TPing on like vampire leech or something, right? That's how that would kind of work. So triggers is very flexible. There is a lot you can do. It's practically endless in the things you can kind of come up with. Like I said, a very simple one that I like to use. Let's take a look at the core. I'll just set one up real quick. It's pretty. It's it's not too bad to set up. If you know what you're looking to do. Like in this particular case, I want my bard to use a job ability, clarion call. Right. My response to the clarion call is my ability, and I want to do cutting cards, and I'll just put it on the actor. So here I don't have to specify because it's going to look at any player that uses clarion call. I'm going to cutting cards on it. That's the actor. This is the targeting. So if I go to my bard, let's see here, and I'll just pop clarion call. Oh, I got to turn on Madros, so he's ready to respond. And if I just do clarion call, you can see, boom, I got cutting cards already, and now my clarion calls, I got shit one, I think, anyway. My clarion call knocked 10 minutes off of it, right? Because it was watching for clarion call, and then obviously, let's go to Madros over here. He uses cutting cards. So there's a lot of interplay. I tried to make the user interface relatively straightforward. Most of this stuff right here is when you're talking about configuring is going to be here. Some key ones is to understand and remember abilities, enemy. These are going to be popular ones, right? You're going to be the enemy TPs. That's most common. And there's an any move. Basically, if an enemy does any TP moves, do this. There's some mobs that maybe you want to stun, right? So instead of making like 6 triggers to stun, what the hell, Zerde, right? You got a bunch of like just desserts, and I don't know what the hell that he does. Maybe you just want any of his damn team moves to stun. You can just be like magic, and then black magic, and then you can just be like stun, right? Boom, there you go. Oh yeah, you got to be on the enemy, and you want the actor. So now you could put Zerde in here if you want. It don't matter. You can leave it as enemy because it's going to check for every enemy then that does a actual TP move. Any TP. Well, that might be a lot of damn enemies then. If all enemies with all TP moves, I mean, it's totally doable. You can do it, but sometimes you want to be a little bit selective, like because you might not want its ads right to if the ad does a TP to Zerde. You don't want to stun that when it does any TP moves. But in this particular case, in theory, you press play and just make sure you put at the top priority, and any TP move that Zerde do, you're going to cast stun on it. That's just how it is. And of course, you want your reset and your timing to be like, like 5-6 seconds, whatever, right? Because you're basically going to be riding on a recast timer if it spams a bunch of TP moves. But like I said, super flexible. A lot of cool things in here just to kind of play with. If you don't, for instance, want to even be engaged, you have the option of be like, hey, only fire this trigger when you're locked on. Like I said, those are conditions. Yeah, it's pretty neat. Like I said, you can kind of, especially if you build your own team, you can do interplay things like I just showed you with the cutting cards when I declaring call, and or if a big enemy TP move comes in, don't even wait. Just go ahead and cast Kiraga, 5 in preparation of the move. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff you can kind of do. So hopefully, as usual, it's not a very fast video, but there's a lot of stuff in here. Hopefully you enjoy it. Triggers are only available on 3.6 main and later. Tons of improvements. I might make a video going all over the changes I usually do, but yeah, I think you'll enjoy it, and I yeah, look forward to the next big task. So take care.